Hello, everybody. It's your boy, the Punk Otaku Scribe, and man, it is a great year to be a kaiju fan. This year has given us Shin Ultraman, Shin Kamen Rider, the Gamera Rebirth series, Godzilla Minus One is on the horizon as of this recording, and this weekend we finally got the premiere of Monarch Legacy of Monsters. Monarch Legacy of Monsters does take place within the Monsterverse and is streaming exclusively on Apple TV Plus. It released the first two episodes on its premiere date, and by now I have seen both episodes. Now, if you'd been following my thoughts on the series leading up to its release, with my trailer reactions and whatnot, you know I wasn't too terribly excited about it. And, well, having seen these first two episodes, I'm kind of just starting to think that maybe I was right. So, thus far, it's very clear with these first two episodes, we're still in the build-up phase. We're still getting to know the characters, we're still getting into the mystery of what the plot is, there's still just a lot of setup going on. And it does leave you to wonder where it's all gonna go. I definitely wanted to know where it was gonna go. And by the end of the second episode, I couldn't help but feel like, I mean, we're getting somewhere, I guess. So, the way this series decides to tell its two concurrent timelines is by doing back and forth flashbacks and current timeline. And it's done very well. You know, you'd think that kind of thing would be confusing, but this show does it very well. Though, despite that being done very well, that doesn't necessarily mean that the story that they're telling with this narrative structure necessarily makes any sense to everything else alongside the Monsterverse. In my trailer reactions, I lamented and asked myself, when did Will Randa have the time to make that home video? And it's shown in the opening minutes of the series. And the opening minutes of the series proves that that happened during Kong Skull Island. But again, when was he ever alone to get chased by a giant spider near the edge of the island where there was the ocean and then a kaiju fight happens? When did that happen? When was he ever alone in Kong Skull Island for that event to happen? When I can remember, he wasn't. And then that bit of contrivance gets worse when this mysterious bag of Monarch files gets thrown into the ocean by him and gets picked up by someone on a fishing boat at the beginning of the series. We don't know who got it or what have you, but later on in the first episode, we find out that the bag ended up in the possession of the main character's father. Somehow. Contrivance and convenience. Frankly, I don't care what they have up their sleeve to explain how the way this plot started makes sense, because there was no point during Kong Skull Island where Will Randa could have pulled this off. There just isn't. Unless they're doing some kind of time travel thing, but that's just gonna be just ridiculous leap and bound to make that happen. It's not going to work, and it has me really worried for the rest of the series. Despite the story starting off ridiculous, however, I will say that the rest of it has compelled me to want to keep watching. It's very well done. The mystery is intriguing, and the cast is really stellar, except for one, but we'll get to that in just a second. From these first two episodes alone, I can already tell that the human element is going to be the most focused aspect, and is so far the best aspect. It's even better than the little bit of kaiju stuff that we've already gotten. But I'm okay with that, because this is called Monarch Legacy of Monsters, not Godzilla Legacy of Monarch. It's not a Godzilla series. It is focused on Monarch as an entity. So I would hope that the human aspect of the series would be as stellar as it is. I just want to point out that this show is giving us Anders Holm playing a young John Goodman. What a time to be alive. But the standout for me in this cast has to be Anna Sawai, who is playing Kate. Kate has a lot of interesting things going on. One of which, of course, is her trauma from the attack that happened in the 2014 time period when Godzilla attacked the bridge. But that's not the only thing she has going on. The writing of this show, if this is a lesser show, they could have just made that her only trait and just clung to that the entire series. But no, they got a lot going on here. Kate discovers that she has an estranged half-brother in Japan, and both she and Kentaro figure out that their father was not a very good person, and they're struggling with that revelation together. They're sort of against each other about it, but they're still struggling with it together. And with Kate, it adds a really good arc that I see going on throughout the show, and I'm really interested to see both her and Kentaro develop in future episodes. Now, there is a second standout for me in this cast, but for the complete opposite reason, a negative reason, and that's Wyatt Russell as Lee Shaw. Now, going in, we already knew that the character of Lee Shaw would be played simultaneously by Kurt Russell and Wyatt Russell, of course, playing the younger version. We're first introduced to the character as Wyatt Russell in the past, and when he first appeared, there was just something about his performance that just put me off. It didn't quite grab me. I wanted to quickly say that it was a bad performance, but we hadn't seen Kurt Russell yet, so I said to myself, okay, maybe I'm judging too early. Let's see how Kurt Russell acts, and maybe that's just how the character is. Because I felt Wyatt Russell was being a little robotic, a little wooden, but maybe that was just the character, right? Well, Kurt Russell appears, he shows up in the second episode, and that wasn't the case at all. It felt like a completely different character. Yeah, sure, Lee Shaw could have developed a more outgoing personality throughout the years, I suppose, but considering the ages that they're all supposed to be in the past, I don't really see that being the case. But the performances when put right next to each other are very vastly different. It was almost like Zachary Levi and the kid in the Shazam movies, where the kid is kind of mature, but Zachary Levi is just kind of like this big goofball and doesn't really represent the kid's personality as a superhero at all. It's almost kind of like that, where young Lee Shaw is this stoic, wooden, robotic person, and when he gets older, he's just this older guy with some swagger. It didn't quite fit. It wasn't quite cohesive. As the show goes on, maybe, hopefully, we'll see the two personalities sort of form and mesh and kind of come together. Maybe young Lee Shaw becomes that later on. But as of right now, I think Wyatt Russell is just awful in this. But enough about the human characters, right? What about the stuff that we're here for? The kaiju stuff. What's that like? Well, there's not a lot of it, but that's okay. With what this show is focusing on, I really don't think we need a lot of it. There's a story here that's being driven by its human characters, and it's being done very well. There doesn't need to be a lot of kaiju action to move it forward or keep us interested. Now, what we do get when it comes to the kaiju stuff is actually really compelling, especially the stuff with Godzilla. Kate is traumatized by the events of the 2014 movie. And when it comes to a scene that happens on the bridge in the first episode, it's easy to see why. You've probably already seen memes about it, but in case you're in the dark about it, in case you don't know anything, I won't spoil it here, but man, it's really messed up. So it's justifiable that she is so messed up over this. I mean, Godzilla alone would have been traumatizing enough, but what happens, what Godzilla causes to happen, is just another extra layer of traumatizing. It was my jaw dropped. Now, I was mainly concerned that the series would cling on to the events far too much and have them affect the things that happen in the series, just not being able to move on from that time period. And at least these episodes, they don't do that. I thought that they used that time period very cleverly so far. But not just that, but with that flashback and another scene later on, they made Godzilla scary again. There's a scene when Kate is in Japan to settle her father's affairs where she meets her estranged brother, where an alarm goes off, a state of emergency goes off because Godzilla is nearby, and all of these citizens rush down into the subway and they're waiting to see what happens. And typically in a scene like that, you would get excited, right? Oh wow, the kaiju of the show or the movie is about to show up. This is going to be really cool. But it doesn't feel that way. It feels very scary. It's actually tension filled because it's not often that you see the citizens this close to the ground actually be affected by the kaiju events and destruction. I really love that these two scenes that I just mentioned made Godzilla feel like such a looming threat. And I feel that he's going to feel that way throughout the entire series, and I'm really looking forward to it. Now, despite the human element being so compelling and driving the narrative really well so far, do I still want to see some really awesome, big, loud kaiju action? Well, sure. I would love to see that. But I don't think that the fact that there isn't much yet means the show is bad or boring. I'm sure at the end or in the last two episodes or something, they're gonna make Godzilla fight some big bad kaiju. It's inevitable that we're gonna get a big scale giant kaiju fight. That's just gonna happen. If they didn't in what is essentially a monsterverse show, then I'd be confused. They'd be confused on what they're doing. They wouldn't know what they were doing if they just completely omitted that. But I think it's pretty obvious we're gonna get some big kaiju fights, if not just one at the end. And even if it is at the end, I'll be completely okay with that. So far, with these two episodes, I'm not necessarily blown away or impressed, but I do want to see where it all ends up. Still feel like it started off kind of clunky and contrived, and how they jumped off of it was just ridiculous, and I don't see how they're going to all tie it all together in a way that makes sense. But what they have here, I do want to see continue, and I'm just interested to see where it all ends up. Anyway, those are just some quick thoughts on the first two episodes of Monarch Legacy of Monsters. But what do you think? Did you check it out this weekend? Are you going to at all? Do you feel I have a point? Do you feel I'm judging too early? Let me know down in the comments. Let's talk everything Monsterverse and Godzilla down there. Anyway, if you like what you saw, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you're new. I've been the Punk Otaku Scribe, and I'll see you in the next one.